We are blessed on this evening to have baritone Martin Woods. Martin is a graduate of Morehouse. He has performed all over the country, and his day job is principal of the University of Chicago Lab School. So please welcome Martin Woods.
Feeling small when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all, 'cause I'm on your side. Times get rough, and when friends just can't be found, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. When you're down and out, or on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you, 'cause I'll take your part. When times are rough, and when pain is all around, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down. See how they shine when you need a friend. Said I'll be standing by, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not care. Everything to God in prayer, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down.
Amen. Good evening. Oh, y'all better that. Good evening. I'm so blessed tonight to have this great prophetic voice with us. So let me introduce him and bring him to you and gain from his wisdom tonight. One of the nation's most prominent scholars, Dr. Eddie Glaude, Jr., is an author, political commentator, public intellectual, and passionate educator who examines the complex dynamics of the American experience. His writings, including Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul, In a Shade of Blue, Pragmatism, and the Politics of Black America, and his most recent, the New York Times bestseller, Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own. Take a wide look at Black communities, the difficulties of race in the United States, and the challenges we face as a democracy. Glaude is the James S. McDonald Distinguished University Professor and the former chair of the Department of the African American Studies at Princeton University from 2009 to 2023. He is also the Morehouse graduate, and he's on the Morehouse College Board of Trustees. He frequently appears in the media as a columnist for Time Magazine and as an MSNBC contributor on programs like Morning Joe and Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace. In his writing and speaking, Dr. Glaude is an American critic in the tradition of James Baldwin and Ralph Waldo Emerson, confronting history and bringing our nation's complexities, vulnerabilities, and hope into full view. Sisters and brothers, in a day when fascism and white supremacy occupy the Oval Office and white nationalism is achieving and advancing, ethnic cleansing is being declared in Gaza, and an unelected civilian billionaire oligarch has access to all of the government, and a MAGA version of Christianity is being perpetrated, we need more than ever to hear voices like Dr. Eddie Glaude and Cornel West and Aubrey Hendricks and Rachel Scott and countless others. We need their voices more than ever to direct us, to inform us, to expose what's going on to us and to lead us forward. Please welcome with me Dr. Eddie Glaude.
Thank you, Father Pfleger, for that gracious introduction. I'm nervous. I want to thank Brother Martin for that wonderful and beautiful rendition. You can hear the power of the Morehouse Glee Club, can't you? I want to thank all of the folk who have made this event possible, the people who turned on the lights, who will clean up after us, the musicians, everyone who's made this moment possible. Sister Pam, thank you for all the work that you've done to get me here. You know, I'm a country boy from Mississippi. I'm my mama's child, raised on the coast of Mississippi in St. Peter's Apostle Catholic Church. So I am honored to be in St. Sabina. I wish my mama could see me. So let me jump into this. Is this all right? I want to begin with an epigraph, and excuse the language. It's from Imani Perry's latest book, Black in Blues, How a Color Tells the Story of My People. Damn near everything promised was snatched away. After 250 years, after all that has been done and said, we still face the unpardonable idea that this country is and must remain white. Unpardonable because of the bodies left in its wake, the blood-soaked soil left behind as people mad with the idea that somehow the color of their skin made them the masters of the world and justified anything they decided to do. And here we are in 2025, faced with the likes of Donald Trump and his ilk, confronting still the idea that this country belongs only to them. Of course, panic is at the root. There is a sense of terror that somehow the country they have imagined has been lost, and those darker souls will exact some kind of revenge, or they have tired of the demand for racial justice. And to their mind, as it has always been, racial justice is a philanthropic enterprise, a charitable gesture to extend to us. So what else do you want, they ask. But Ralph Ellison wrote in 1970 that, quote, whenever the nation grows weary of the struggle toward the ideal of American democratic equality, they reach for the illusion of secession, the fantasy of a lily-white America. That fantasy, of course, involves not only the desire to rid the nation of black and brown people, but aims to banish us and the issue of race from the nation's moral conscience, to render our history as a mere footnote in the struggle for democracy. These political forces cast aside the creative tensions around race that have made the country what it is. In their hands, America's original sin is settled by the wishful effort to wash the nation clean, to make it alabaster white. And we've seen this throughout the history of the country, Father Pfleger, from schemes during the antebellum period to send free black people to Liberia, to President Lincoln's insistence that free blacks accept the colonization scheme because white people suffer from your presence, to the lies of the lost cause and redemption, to American immigration law like the Immigration Act of 1924 that insisted that ours must remain a white nation, to the clamoring around the border today and the bitter fights about what to teach our children in schools. This is the tragic feature of American life. that seemingly inescapable petulance and moral fatigue that leads so many to put aside efforts to make real the promises of American democracy and instead find comfort and safety in the idea that this country belongs only to white people. And we have to deal with this over and over and over again. This continuous loop, what we might call freedom snatching, is rooted in a tragic choice that attempts to reconcile American democracy with the vile belief that the color of one's skin determines one's value. It is always looking towards the present with the view of the past, communicated in image and in language, rooted in myth and illusion from which to look away from the mirror that reveals who we actually are. At one point, we recognized the struggle for freedom and justice as central to the country's self-conception, only to reject it with startling brutality. And we who must bear the burden of it all must find the resources to keep from succumbing to an intolerable bitterness of spirit. How do we not conclude with Elijah Muhammad that we are surrounded by devils? How do we not ask with Stampede in Toni Morrison's magisterial novel, Beloved, what are these people? Tell me, Jesus, what are they? If I'm to be honest, I would have to admit that the reality of the nation corroborates the view that my spirit is weary. The very idea that the country would elect this man again speaks volumes about where the nation is, and they lied. They told us it was about the price of eggs. Can I take my time? They told us it was the economy and worries about Biden's overreach, that I have criticisms of the Democratic Party, but that wasn't the reason. Some folk couldn't bring themselves to vote for a black woman. They would rather have a felon as president. They would rather have an incompetent narcissist as president, but they lied. And when they were caught in the lie, they doubled down. I'm reminded of Robert Penn Warren's formulation in The Legacy of the Civil War. What did he say? He said, righteousness is our first refuge. He's talking about the country. He said, righteousness is our first refuge and our strength, even when we have acted on the grounds of calculated self-interest. And he goes on to say, and even when we have been caught red-handed and have to admit to a great bumbling horse apple of a lie. He says, in such a case, the effect of the conviction of virtue is to make us lie automatically and awkwardly with no elan of artistry and no forethought, and then trying to justify the lie to ourselves and transmute the lie into a kind of superior truth. We lie until it becomes the truth, yes? In the face of it all, a kind of bitterness threatens to overwhelm. A rage simmers underneath a forced smile. And you work hard at holding off the conclusion that the country is lost. What is clear is that we find ourselves, and there's no reasonable way to deny this, in a moment of profound crisis. They've done it again. The country is changing, or is it collapsing? I don't know. We see those among us who clamor for the good old days as they confront the political and cultural implications of demographic shifts. They long for an America that looks and feels a certain way, and this nostalgia, alongside the intimacy and intensity of hatred and unbridled greed, has brought the nation to its knees. The divisions within the country, white, black, rural, urban, rich, poor, Republican, Democrat, are in full view. It feels as if the institutions and norms of our democracy are collapsing right in front of us. A politicized court, a gerrymandered House, a broken Senate, an executive branch tainted by the idea of an imperial presidency occupied by a thug who wants to be a dictator. Panic and terror have gripped the nation, and men and women mad with the fever of a distorted view of liberty threaten to throw away this entire experiment in democracy as they cling to their fantasies. America is changing, or is it collapsing? But as James Baldwin put it, the horror is that America changes all the time without ever changing at all. We've seen this nonsense before. You know, I've been struggling as of late with the idea of America. What does this formulation mean? How might we understand it apart from some facile attempt to distinguish American nationalism from nationalisms of blood and soil? There are a set of principles that define this republic, principles articulated at the initial moment of creation. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." But those ideas have been contested from the beginning, fought over, blood spilt in the name of them. America is perhaps an idea, but it is also an argument. A fight might better be the description, right? It's a fight over its meanings and broad application, but there is also something else lurking in the shadows here, something not so easily captured by phrases like our better angels or progress toward a more perfect union. A closer look at the country exposes the gap at the moment of creation between the ideals and the lived practices that unravel them. The horrors of slavery compromised the very beginning, and the lies we tell ourselves that split an emerging national consciousness in two. What do we make of the fact that we've been lying to ourselves since the beginning about who we are and what we've become? You know, to my mind, a lie repeatedly told becomes a unique form of American madness. Kind of madness that haunts the nation until this day. Y'all all right? I came across this story while reading about the revolutionary period in the country's history. Listen at this. On December 14, 1763, the Paxton Volunteers in the backcountry of Pennsylvania attacked a Native American village, the Conestoga Village. And they murdered the native men, women, and children, and they burned their cabins to the ground. And the volunteers claimed that the Susquehannocks, who had long ties with the surrounding communities, were in fact secret enemies, French allied and poised to slaughter white folk. Then Governor John Penn got word of the actions of these men, and he called for the perpetrators to be captured and charged with murder. But instead, the volunteers hunted down more native peoples, many of whom had fled to Lancaster, Pennsylvania after the attack, and they slaughtered them too. To protect the native peoples, the Pennsylvania government relocated them to Philadelphia and put them in military barracks defended by British regulars for safety. And this act by the Pennsylvania government led the volunteers to conclude, quote, that their government did not protect the safety and liberty of its own people, but enforced dangerous allegiances with savages who would unleash horrors against the backcountry settlers. 250 or so men decided to march to Philly to confront the government. Ben Franklin was dispatched to meet them, and when Franklin arrived, the men handed him a petition that claimed the government had ignored their concerns. They didn't express regret or guilt for their actions, and others defended them, said that they were young and inflamed by passions. One pamphlet entitled "The Conduct of the Paxton Men," impartially represented, suggested that they had in fact lost their minds, but their madness had been driven by the government's good treatment of heathens and traitors. They insisted that their liberty and their lives mattered more than others. Before we were a country, men mad with the fever of liberty and the belief that their lives mattered more than others threatened to pull apart the very fabric of the society. Think about it. Before we were a country, there was already a January 6th. You hear the parallels? And we see in this story the intimacy of our hatreds, not just the hatred towards those who lived among them, traded with them, and with whom they had long-lasting relationships, but the intimacy of those who felt a kinship with the murderers, who loved them and defended them no matter their monstrous activities. Folk knew who killed Emmett Till. How did they know? Because they drank beer with them. They played checkers with them. Folk knew who attacked the Capitol. How did they know? Because it's their mama. It's their daddy. It's the folk who sit around the table with them. And here we are today. The fever still holds. Y'all all right? We see it in the manufactured panic around DEI and immigration. We see it in the racism that animates so much of our current politics, the racism like a boil bursting forth, as Ralph Ellison says, from the impurities in the bloodstream of American democracy. Fears of the great replacement that motivate so much of the vitriol behind the immigration debate all express the desire of getting shut of the problem of ridding the country of the browns and the blacks that present a danger to the white republic, the unwanted others that pollute the blood. That getting shut isn't just about deportation, as the talk of ending birthright citizenship and overturning affirmative discrimination policies that disadvantage white America reveals. It is also about putting those people in their rightful place. A distorted view of liberty that sanctions violence, along with this belief that some among us, because of the color of their skin, ought to be valued more than others. These people have a different sense of possession of the country, while the rest of us should simply shut up and be grateful. These ideas are as old as the Republic. They are the serpents that have threatened to swallow this fragile experiment whole. And any sincere grappling with who we will become as a nation must confront this serpent in the garden. It seems to me, if we are sincere, and the question of sincerity is always a vexing issue in this country, that we have to face honestly what is at the heart of our current malaise. We have to tap the source. The time has come for us to examine ourselves for who we really are and in the full light of what we've done. And we must do so without the crutch of our myths, legends about American exceptionalism, legends that protect our innocence. That examination must involve an attempt, to use Baldwin's words again, to find out what is really happening here. Tell ourselves that we are an example of democracy achieved, that this nation is the shining city on the hill. But these stories aim to conceal the callous heart of this country. Baldwin put it this way in 1964. The people who settled the country had a fatal flaw. They could recognize a man when they saw one. They knew he wasn't anything else but a man. But since they were Christian, and since they had already decided that they came here to establish a free country, the only way to justify the role this chattel was playing in one's life was to say that he was not a man. For if he wasn't, then no crime had been committed. And then Baldwin says, that lie is the basis of our present trouble. And the fear of being exposed has often driven this place to unimaginable cruelty. What we know is that this country has been and continues to be a place where the belief that white people matter more affects the distribution and advantage and disadvantage, that we have created a way of life where some are valued and have standing, while others must experience what philosophers describe as a generalized sense of disregard. These folk are talking about DEI, and all of these mediocre white men are just walking in front of us. What do we say to these folk? I got to tell the truth. Y'all see why I haven't been on Morning Joe for a while. The refusal to confront this reality, the refusal to confront the lie, Father Flager, has resulted in us not knowing who we really are. I'm reminded again of the words of Ralph Ellison and James Baldwin. Ellison had a formulation about American democracy that caught my attention. He says, quote, "The home we seek is the condition of man's being at home in the world, which is called love. and which we term democracy. Our task then is always to challenge the apparent forms of reality, that is, the fixed manners and values of the few, and to struggle with it until it reveals its mad, varied, implicated chaos, its false faces, and on until it surrenders its insight, its truth, end quote. Ellison would declare that America is yet to discover itself. The metaphor of discovery, of course, is a complicated one, but he's right, though. He understood that we were not, in fact, at home in the world, that there was something quite loveless about this place. And what would that mean for our idea of democracy itself? Baldwin put it this way in No Name in the Street. I have always been struck, he said, in America by an emotional poverty so bottomless and a terror of human life, of human touch so deep that virtually no American appears able to achieve any viable organic connection between his public stance and his private life. This is what makes them so baffling, so moving, so exasperating, and so untrustworthy. This is a place, Baldwin says, this is no place for love. He echoes the moment in a formulation in the 1960 speech at Kalamazoo College. He says, I want to suggest most seriously that before we can do very much in the way of clear thinking, clear doing as it relates to minorities in this country, we must first crack the American image and find out and deal with what it hides. We must crack the American image and find out and deal with what it hides. Here we see the power of Baldwin's reversal and the penetrating nature of his insight. We are not the problem. We have never been the problem. The madness consumes the heart of this place. They, quote, Baldwin says, they do not really know what it is that they are afraid of, but they know that they are afraid of something, and they're so frightened that they are nearly out of their minds. Fear and panic driving our current moment. Fear and panic, this sense has haunted this place, and every moment when we seemingly stand on the cusp of a new America, that sense of panic and terror returns. Y'all all right? Yeah. Because you know I'm a professor, I can run my mouth. That sense of panic and terror returns at the moment in which a new America seems to be emerging. When we have a chance to imagine America anew, we have witnessed over and over again as we are experiencing now the reassertion of the idea that the country belongs only to them. Every single time a new America, we lurch back, the continuous loop, freedom snatching. And then we have to conduct our blooming, as Gwendolyn Brooks says, we have to conduct our blooming in the noise of the whip and whirl of the whirlwind. We have to raise our babies in the midst of their madness. We have to confront it, yes? We have to toss aside the illusions and fantasies that protect their innocence. That is the only way this country can finally grow up. To quote Baldwin again, what is most terrible is that American white men are not prepared to believe our version of the story. Because in order to believe it, in order to avoid believing that, they have set up in themselves a fantastic system of evasions, denials, and justifications, a system which is about to destroy their grasp of reality, which is another way of saying their moral sense. Baldwin says, what I'm trying to say is that the crime is not the most important thing here. What makes our situation serious is that we have spent so many generations pretending that it did not happen. We're in a moment of profound disremembering, to use Toni Morrison's language. And what I'm trying to suggest here, however clumsily, is that this is a form of madness. A form of madness that we've had to deal with from the beginning, and that madness evidences itself in us. What else is double consciousness but a form of madness? But we see ourselves through the eyes of those who despise us. But that particular vantage point gives us a particular way of seeing the country. What else is August Wilson saying in his cycle of plays? It's the mad men and women who perform the chorus in those plays who offer us true insight. Y'all following me? It's Ellison's Golden Day and Invisible Man, where madness becomes the sight of how we find the truth of who we are. If we are to be otherwise, if we are to imagine America as something more, we have to tell ourselves the truth. And that truth or better acceptance becomes the basis for a different way of being together. But it's so hard to tell ourselves the truth in this country. We would rather affirm our goodness, titillated by markets, affirmed through consumption, guided by image, moved about by what Imani Perry describes as the pornographic algorithms of desire. Y'all know y'all watch your TikTok. Where the illusion of safety and comfort is found there. But in doing so, we remain permanently docked at the station, doing the same thing over and over again. Wash, rinse, and repeat. Thinking about my mama and my grandmama, knowing what they grew up in Mississippi, and how they have to think about their grandchildren having to deal with this. I don't want to say that, I'm in church. If we're going to come through this moment, we're going to get our babies to the other side. If we're finally going to get out of history's ass pocket and become the kinds of people democracies require, we're going to have to tell the truth. And then a bit more. We're going to have to be courageous, y'all. We're going to have to find our way home. And nothing personal, Baldwin said it, put the point succinctly. He says, we are afraid. All right, Lord, I hear you. We are afraid to reveal ourselves because we trust ourselves so little. And in this labyrinth, the person is desperately trying not to find out what he really thinks, and therefore the truth cannot be told, even about one's attitudes. He says, we live by lies. Trump is just the tip of the iceberg. It's the rot that produced him. We can no longer tell ourselves a story of American virtue that secures our innocence. We must confront the lies that sustain that innocence. As Baldwin put it again, it is not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence that constitutes the crime. This country has never been a beacon of virtue, nor is it a shining city on the hill. But to admit that doesn't make us irredeemable. It doesn't condemn us to the gallows. It's no different than admitting, if you're a Christian, that you're a sinner. That admission, if it's genuine, sets the stage for a different kind of human being to emerge, a different relationship to the world to emerge. White Americans, tell themselves stories of virtue in order to protect themselves from the real consequences of their evils. And in the end, and I say this in the full light of what's happening now, our problem in the United States go beyond who occupies the White House or the bombast of a politician or the latest example of American racism. We have to get to the root, at the heart of the matter. It is the necessary condition for us to finally grow up. I've said this before and I must say it now. Americans are trapped in a history we refuse to know but carry within us. Faulkner said it, the past is not the past. The terrors and panic we experience have everything to do with that gap between who we imagine ourselves to be and who deep down we really are, and the unsettling realization that some among us know who we really are. We live in that gap. Live in this kind of perpetual adolescence, what June Jordan referred to as that nasty American habit of genteel make-believe. We have to be rageful in this moment. I say all the time that white men and women don't have a monopoly on selfishness and greed. There's some of us who've succumbed to the bribe. There's some of us who've gotten the notion of freedom confused, that freedom involves a nice tailor-made suit and a great house and a decent car, nice car. I got one. That some of us believe that freedom has something to do with us being able to put our feet under white folks' table. We have to begin to understand the tradition that has made us possible, the tradition that has brought us to now. Where will we find our feet in this moment? I'm reminded of the powerful moment in Jesmyn Ward's novel, Sing, Unburied, Sing. Have you read it before? And she captures the haunting consequence of those who didn't die right because of it all. The story of the revenant that shadows our days. What did she say? She said, the branches are full. They are full with ghosts, 2 or 3, all the way to the top, to the feathered leaves. There are women and men and boys and girls, some of them near to babies. They crouch looking at me, black and brown, and the closest near baby, smoke white. None of them reveal their deaths, but I see it in their eyes, their great black eyes. They perch like birds, but look as people. They speak with their eyes. He raped me and suffocated me until I died. I put my hands up, and he shot me 8 times. She locked me in the shed and starved me to death while I listened to my babies playing with her in the yard. They came in my cell in the middle of the night and they hung me. They found I could read and they dragged me out to the barn and gouged my eyes before they beat me. Still, I was sick and he said I was an abomination. And Jesus said, suffer little children, so let her go. And he put her under the water and I couldn't breathe. Eyes blink as the sun blazes and winks below the forest line so that the ghosts catch the color. Reflect the red, the sun making scarlet plumage of the clothes they wear, rags and breeches. T-shirts and tic-nods, fedoras and hoods. The haunting and terror of history. Here, Ward rewrites in so many ways the middle passage in a different time and register. History matters because we carry it within us. And as James Baldwin wrote, it is with great pain and terror that one begins to assess that history, which has placed one where one is and formed one's point of view, because one enters into battle with that historical creation itself. This involves confronting the ghost that haunts. What are you going to do in relation to the tradition that has made you possible? How will you pay homage to your dead? How will you live up to those who sacrificed to make this possible? How shall we put ourselves in touch with reality? I'm coming home. We have to flip the script. We just can't have a history that haunts us. We have to haunt that history to find resources to fight the battle today. Trying to get somewhere. If we're going to come through this, we have to crack the image and find out and deal with what it hides. And to do that, we will have to tell the truth and then a little more. We have to confront the illusions. And it involves risking it all in moments like these in order to release us into a new way of being together. When the fever dream spikes, when white folk, and when I say white folk, I'm talking at a certain level of generality. James Baldwin would say, I happen to love a lot of people who happen to be white, and then they're white folks. Okay. Marinate on that. When the fever dream spikes, our task has been to get our babies to the other side. The responsibility to get our babies to the other side. We have to risk everything in this moment. In order for this to happen, if we're going to find a new way of being together, we will have to admit that the trouble is deeper than we wish to think, because the trouble is in us. We are the serpents in the garden. Baldwin said, I conceive of my life as a journey towards something I do not understand, which is in the going toward makes me better. In the going toward, in the going toward makes me better. We have to fight for the future right now. It is in the going towards that our salvation is to be found. That means, in my view, committing ourselves to building a country close to the ground where love animates our doing and sufferings, where we affirm the dignity and sacrality of every human being, no matter the color of their skin, their zip code, or where they're from, who they love, their gender, or their ability. It is an affirmation of the dignity and worth of every human being, a rejection of the idea that anyone or any group is disposable, that we are all fallen and redeemable. To echo Dr. King, this is a view of democracy where love animates our doings and sufferings. Tell the truth. We have to become the kinds of people that democracies require. There's an emptiness in this country. There's an emptiness in them. There's an emptiness in us. And no amount of material possessions can fill it. If we are to get at the root of white supremacy's hold on our lives, we have to confront that emptiness directly, without the security and crutch of our myths and legends. You know, Baldwin said that America is not a place for love, but those words reflect the license of an artist. He knows love saved his life, even though he never really believed that anyone could love him. And it is in this contrast, it's in this context, right, that a kind of faith must be expressed. The country that refuses to grow up, that continues to turn its back on us, requires that we love each other unconditional, that we love each other into a brighter future. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what Donald Trump will do tomorrow. I know a lot of federal workers will lose their jobs and their ability to pay their mortgage and send their kids to college. I don't know what these folk are going to do tomorrow. But I can get a good idea. I can get a good sense of what I'm going to do tomorrow. And what will you do? Will you stand by and allow these folk to do this again? Or will we stand in the tradition that made us who we are and fight these folk like they've never seen before?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Come on, Matthew.
I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. But I do know I'm not interested in politicians putting on kente cloth scarves. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day, but I'm not interested in legacy civil rights organizations who are taking money from Target as they boycott Target. I don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow, but I know that we are not cattle chewing cud to follow some black leader who's going to just herd us to the next march. I know what we must do.
Come on, Doctor.
Our task is to speak back to the ghost, to tell him to go on and rest now, to hush, because we got this. We were born for such a time as this. Find the courage and let's show these people who we are. Thank you. I've taxed your patience. I do know this, that Miss Ella Baker was right. A strong people don't need leaders. We the leaders we've been looking for. And I serve a God, Father Flavor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I serve a God that's not dead because he's in each of you. Amen.
Come on, put your hands together for Dr. Glaude. This is what we need. Now, this is what we need.